So my 10-year-old daughter was coming home from school every day and doing about 2 hours of homework. 2 hours at 10 years old. And at the same time, I was developing my own ideas based upon my own experience as an educator and the research that I was doing, and I knew that something needed to change. She was suffering. It all came to a critical head when she came home one day and told us that she had eaten her lunch in the restroom because she had so much anxiety. So I had been a teacher for about a decade and a half. I had taught in multiple countries around the world. I had taught in public education, in private education. I taught at higher ed. I actually had a ton of experience, and I was developing my own ideas about what education should look like. My first and strongest opinion, which was supported by the research, was that first and foremost, teachers should take into consideration the health of the brain of their students. If a child is not feeling safe, accepted, and loved, then stress begins to kick in. Now, stress by itself isn't actually a bad thing. If stress comes and then leaves, it's actually just a normal part of the human condition. But if stress is constant and continuous, a student actually begins to have a really, really negative effect. The great neuroscientist Robert Sapolsky taught us that every once in a while, stress and anxiety can be okay, but that constant stress actually starts to break down a whole bunch of things in the brain, and we have learned through research that learning precipitously drops off. In other words, stress is the antithesis of learning. An example of this is when I was teaching in Taiwan. I was there right after college teaching English, and I was there as an after-school program for kids who were learning English. English was a really high priority for parents in Taiwan, and they would send kids to these schools called bushibans, and in those bushibans we would teach them English. So after they'd already had a full day of learning at a normal school, they would then come to our school for sometimes 3, 4, sometimes even 5 hours. You can imagine the sort of stress that was on these kids after they were tired, after they'd already had a full day, they'd already had things go on in their normal school. So they were coming to us, and we were trying to teach them English. We noticed that there was a direct correlation between the affection that a student felt for his teacher and their ability to learn English. An example of this is one of my favorite students, Sonia. Sonia was just so interested in me. She would come to class every day and she would put herself right next to me. She would lay her head on my shoulder. She would even sometimes grab my hand and she would rub it. And she really, really liked me. And I really, really liked her. She was sweet. And we noticed that if this sort of thing happened, that if a student could come into the environment and feel super, super safe, they would just learn. We had students at this time that were learning in just 5 months. Safety, acceptance, and love is the foundation actually of any learning that happens in the human brain. But along with safety, acceptance, and love is the dopamine system. My daughter, when she was coming home from school, was actually struggling most with math. Now, math is a challenge. I know. We all know that math is a little bit hard. It doesn't actually come supernaturally to us. It's not like language or something like that we just do before we're 4 years old. So math is something that we have to learn later. But I actually believe that the reason that we all hate math isn't because of math itself, but because we actually have no reason to use it. We don't see the importance of it in our lives. If math were as important to us as our most beloved hobbies, we would actually learn math really, really quickly. So a good example of this is Isaac Newton. Isaac Newton, one of our greatest mathematicians, the founder of calculus, actually didn't really understand the necessity of learning a particular part of math called trigonometry. Now, Isaac Newton's real passion was astronomy. He wanted to become a great astronomer. And as he was developing his skills in astronomy, he realized that this particular section of math, trigonometry, was going to be really, really important because it was critical to understanding orbital mechanics, to understanding how planets moved around in space. And so what did he do? He went out and he learned it. Not only did he learn trigonometry, but he understood that there was a part of math that was hidden to humans. And so he developed calculus, and calculus has then become one of our most important parts of math, especially when it comes to astronomy and space. So my daughter wasn't crying because of the math. My daughter was crying because she had to go to school every day and be tortured with this thing called math. She was going to school every day and not really understanding the reason why she was studying this thing, why she was being asked to study this thing. It was as if she was a slave. being forced to push a rock uphill and never really understanding that she was pushing the rock uphill because she was creating a pyramid. So at the same time that I was watching the spark go out of my daughter's eyes, I was teaching at the college, and I was noticing that the students at that level had the spark almost completely gone. Day after day, I saw students come through the college into these classes, and I could not put the spark back in. They didn't understand the reason why they were going to college other than they needed a diploma so that they could get a job. It was difficult for them to understand that learning itself was something that was desirable for some other end. The only thing that they wanted to do was jump through the hoops so that they could get the job after they got the diploma. They were full of potential. They were full of intelligence, but they actually just didn't see learning as something that they could use to innovate in their lives and be super creative. It was something else. So I was really sympathetic to their situation, but I was actually really, really concerned that my daughter was going to be in that situation herself. So I decided to dedicate the rest of my life to creating the greatest school that I could create. And one of the ways that I did it was to dive into human learning, to understand how the brain actually learns. That once you can kind of hone in on the brain and how it learns as a human, that therefore you have a school. So to see what our school looked like, click this video, wherever it is, somewhere around here. If you're also interested in trying to help your student to try to get that love of learning back, I have a free 5-day method to try to get your kid back to love of learning. But my message is this: get out there, try to change your kids' education. They're going to thank you for it for the rest of their lives.